Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining me here today. I'm your host, Linz Piper Loomis with I Am Silent No More. Um, so I'm going to try my best not to be emotional today. I'm so thankful to have this opportunity to share Sheriff Scott Jenkins with you. He was just pardoned by President Donald J. Trump. So welcome, sir.
Thank you for having me, Lynn.
Absolutely. So I guess I just wanted to I guess, start out first just by saying I met you at the border almost 4 years ago and had the opportunity just to speak with you for a time and stayed in touch. And I found out, really, I think what caused this entire uh, catastrophe and heartache on your side. Do we have that first photo that we can put up there? So, these are some of the things that you were sending to me, but as I learned from you, you were willing to deputize private citizens, and you put that out there, and then this was something that you were following through on. So can you tell us like what started this whole thing?
Sure. And I try to be as short as I can. It's a lot. So I'll give you little snippets and snapshots and happy to elaborate on anything you'd like. For those who know nothing about me, I was a small town sheriff for 12 years here in Culpeper, Virginia, about 50 miles southwest of the White House. Born and raised here and in law enforcement a total of 34 years. But the citizens elected me to start serving in 2012. And along the way of those 12 years, I took some strong stances on things I believed to be right and never wavered, and one of which was the Second Amendment issue. In the end of 2019, December, the legislature submitted bills to ban AR 15s and high capacity magazines. As a sheriff, I had long before, years prior, thought of, what would I do, push come to shove, if there was an unconstitutional law. Unlike a lot of sheriffs, and this is not to disparage any sheriff, everyone has their own choices. But a lot of figureheads, politicians, others, when faced with questions and concerns over bills that become law, such as that, they'll say things like, "Well, I won't enforce an unconstitutional law." What does that really mean? I heard that many times, and as a new sheriff, and then on through the years serving, I realized there's a lot of talking heads that say things, and when it push comes to shove, how do you really protect your citizens' rights instead of just lip service? And that's all it is. If you say, well, you won't enforce it, if they enacted a bill such as this, well, what will you really do? Does that mean just the men that work under you won't enforce it? And how does that really matter in a county that has city or town police, state police, and others who would enforce it? It doesn't
Mhm.
mean much of anything, really. And again, not disparaging anyone. It's just, you're elected to that most powerful law enforcement job in your county. You're the chief law enforcement officer, as a sheriff. And a lot of citizens don't understand that either, but I can get more into that. But um, so I had long before this time researched what I could do, and it was the fact that if I chose to, I could swear in a posse. Days of old, I doubt there's an American anywhere who didn't at some point see a Western where the sheriff rounds up a group of people, asks them to swear an oath, and grab their gun and go hunt down a fugitive or what have you. So
Yeah.
the concept is not foreign to any American, I don't believe. And that thought of a sheriff, county sheriff, originates in Virginia. The oldest sheriff's office, the first, was in Virginia, and the laws giving sheriffs their authority and wide latitude that they have, unlike police chiefs and others in law enforcement, completely different. Those laws have remained strong and the same here in Virginia for a few hundred years. And a sheriff in Virginia, when I served, a sheriff could still swear in a posse, swear in auxiliary or volunteer deputies. You could term them reserve, auxiliary. There's some different categories that you could list them as, but nonetheless, in addition to your paid staff that you had every day working for salaries for many years. So that's the baseline to think about so that people can understand a sheriff. They are unlike the chief of police or anyone else in law enforcement. They are the only law enforcement leader in the United States that answers directly to the voters and no one else. We don't answer to a city mayor. We don't answer to a city council, a governor, and most people don't understand that. You know, in Virginia, especially, um, the uh, the office of sheriff, like the other four constitutional offices in local counties, are completely independent of the local government, and that is huge in being able to carry out and do what you choose to do based on the platform you're elected to do by the citizens. So that said, I had made that promise in the end of 2019 and early 2020, even going to Richmond and repeating it many times with a committee there that was looking to pass that bill. It came to a head on a given day where I had to clarify for them because I truly don't believe they got it. They didn't. They were, I think, basically they were just thumbing their nose at even the thought of it. And at the committee that day, I made them aware. I said, I don't think you're following me. I am not bound by the county borders of my county that I'm sworn in. I have deputies every day that come to work from 3 counties away. I can swear you in regardless of what county you live in Virginia, which, if you're not understanding, that means I can choose to swear in tens of thousands from all over Virginia who may have these so called assault weapons, as you call them, in high capacity magazines. And let me pause for one moment just to elaborate just a little for those. There's always the haters and the naysayers that if they're watching this, they're going to jump in and try to shut down the thought and understanding of a pretty simple, logical choice. There are many who will say, "Well, Sheriff, you're not a legal scholar. You're certainly not a constitutional law expert, and how dare you, a lowly local sheriff, interpret a Supreme Court case to say whether or not a law is constitutional to have these AR-15s and so forth." Um, I have common sense. I can read and understand the laws and case law. And the Supreme Court had already ruled about weapons in common use. There's no more common sporting rifle in America than an AR-15, and there's no more common use pistol as far as defense for our citizens than the high capacity magazine semi-autos. And I use my county as an example. Thousands of citizens carry them every day with concealed carry. So I understood that to be clearly an unconstitutional law to ban these guns that are clearly in common use, as the Supreme Court had already ruled. And I felt that what I was offering as a pushback was the best I could do as a sheriff. Not lip service, but to really something tangible. The citizens should not be disarmed. They have a right to have those weapons for protection, and and that's a whole other argument there to go down another direction. But those of us who truly believe in the Constitution and study and understand it clearly don't fall victim to these arguments, these stupid conversations that the talking heads have about, um, whether or not you should have this weapon of war, this assault weapon, all the terms they use for it. Stop for a minute. The people who were writing that law, they didn't just come back from a hunting trip. Those weapons that they were talking about allowing you to keep and bear were not designed to hunt with or other things. They were designed for a purpose, and that's why they wrote it that way. So that said, um, the argument about these horrible weapons, it just gets old. So I say that knowing full well, understanding completely what I was promising to do and what it meant. But to me, as a sheriff, and I say that today, these good citizens that elected me and own these horrible weapons that some people term them aren't suddenly, when they get sworn in, to be able to keep these weapons, sworn in as an auxiliary deputy, given a ID card and a badge. That's it. No police car, no uniforms, but to be available for call up, much like a posse. Um, that legally allows them to keep their weapons they've owned for years. Are they suddenly going to go out and start committing crimes with these weapons just because the sheriff swore them in? It's ridiculous. They're the same
Yeah.
good people that elected me into office and have done nothing wrong, yet the legislature was wanting to take them. So I took that stand, and boy, did I create a firestorm. But standing toe to toe that day in Richmond, later the governor Northam He's a piece of work. He made a statement in the media more than once, but the one clearly after that was that he would deal with me later. And I won't go into some rabbit hole going that direction, but I learned a lot in the last 2.5 years. I saw at the national level things like a James Comey. We've heard enough about him lately with his big 8647 thing that he claims no knowledge of. That man,
Right.
not a disgrace.
Yeah.
But I didn't know his ties to Richmond and the law firms down there, and of course Governor Northam, and you're a small town sheriff. You don't know the who's who and who knows what for or who for a favor. So I learned the hard way. um, Nonetheless, and that's not worth going into in great detail because again, I try to just talk about the things that can be pointed to and easily verified
Yes.
or understood, not things that are he said, she said, because I don't think that helps. If I did that, I could talk for days of the horrible things, but I'll try to stick
Yeah.
to what's easy for viewers to verify and just to corroborate what I'm saying. So I took that stand. It was high profile. I mean, it got me a lot of national attention. Everyone gets their 15 minutes of fame, I guess. COVID came along and shut that down. I often comment and kind of chuckle about the fact there was one other reason probably Governor Northam was a little angry at me. Back when the governor had his blackface incident when that first broke, I'm the guy who that week saw that, well, there might be a name for a reason to capture the copyright on Make Virginia Great Again. So I did. I actually bought that term and printed shirts and hats by the thousands and actually sold them at the Richmond Gun Rally. But a lot of people may have those red shirts that they look like MAGA memorabilia, but they're actually Make Virginia Great Again. And that was, I think, another angst that a lot of them had heartburn over with me. But it actually dovetailed later into what they were trying to accuse me of. That I had a friend who did become an auxiliary, and long story short, they they used that some of the money that he and I exchanged to invest in this business venture to buy these thousands and thousands of hats and shirts. They later used that in court and had no verifiable proof on no no tracking, no nothing. They just, like so many things in that court case, they just threw things out to the jury and hoped that the jury and the judge would swallow it. And they did. They swallowed a lot of things and they had nothing that they brought to court to verify and prove anything. So and I'll kind of jump in there. Those who want, we want to get as much as we can out of the time we have for people that, like the citizens in my community who may watch this and are wanting to know, well, what's the truth? Are you really a dirty cop? Did you really take bribes and so on? For those listening right now, just listen up and think about this. Let's start at the very beginning and the end for the court case and say, okay, if you have something false in the beginning or dirty, unethical done in the beginning and at the end, then there's a lot of stuff in between that is too. And I'll give you two easy examples. In the beginning of the court case, let's think about it. If you're charging me for bribery, accepting money that supposedly I took for my personal benefit, then I would think there would have to be something in the court case where you show one of a couple options. Either you show the money, I received it, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with receiving a donation to your campaign, and that's the part they hang on. It's, oh my gosh, here he is accepting this money, but you have to say or show that I did something with it for personal gain. And did they? Absolutely not. They didn't show a thing in court. And the media, the community, I have people who've known me all their life, and they bought this sick mess of information that was fed to them, where so let's focus on that. I'll try to be short. You should either show to the jury that I used it for personal benefit or that it was gone, it vanished, and maybe I'm hiding it somewhere and it can't be found. And you can't find it. But see, neither one of those are true. Those agents came and sat down with me, and I talked to them for a couple hours and answered their questions. And they had a search warrant to take my phones and to search my home. They did take my telephone, but they knew if they went to serve the search warrant, as I've said 1,000 times to people, and especially recently, all that money was sitting in a fireproof bag on the door of my gun vault in my home. And it stayed there for 2.5 years until I was convicted, waiting for them to do the right thing, the ethical thing. And they never did. And I'll actually hang on. I'll show you here. I've got a snapshot on my phone that, and those who don't know, I mean, these pictures, they are time stamped and have a GPS coordinates. But here's an example of what I'm talking about. Those are the bills. That's their money that they had set up with, and that's a whole other story with their setup. But yeah, if you have a search warrant and you're talking to me saying that I've taken bribes, then if I had a detective that didn't follow through and execute the search warrant and chose to leave that, because knowing that if you go and obtain it and it's all there, well, it's ruined your case. But you took an oath. You have an obligation. If there's evidence to prove innocence, you are just as responsible, just as much required to go get that as you are evidence of guilt. And
Mhm.
um, they didn't do that. They didn't do it on the day they questioned me in January of 2023, and they never did it until the day they convicted me. So let's fast forward. If they did that unethical thing that we would expect better of anyone, let alone this so-called elite law enforcement agency, which to me, until it can be revamped, it certainly isn't what it once was. Fast forward to the end. So if you have a judge that's going to lock me in a cage for 10 years, and let me start by saying I may sound like I'm angry or what have you toward the judge, and it's not. The judge is just as vulnerable as the jury was to this uh, load of crap that was fed to him, and he took it hook, line, and sinker. I guess he didn't do his homework, but I was the least educated person in the room. I'm a high school graduate. I never even completed a 2-year degree. I've got a team of lawyers from DOJ. These ladies all have law degrees and a judge that does. And yet I'm sitting there trying to defend my life here for days. And at the end of it all, when I get sentenced, this judge says three things that are absolutely, positively, demonstrably false. In his statement to me, he's chewing my butt, telling me I'm a criminal. And he says that I hired unqualified, unvetted men and women to be auxiliary deputies, and I did not train them as required. Now, so
Wow.
let's think about those three things. If it's coming out of your mouth and you're a federal judge locking me up for 10 years,
Mhm.
if you have something false that you're saying on 3 points, you're false, that is false information, what else have you been fed during the days of trial? Because okay, let's break it down. Those three things, and that's the thing for the jury. Let's think about this. Citizens in my county are listening to this. Please pay attention because there's a lot in between the beginning and the end that I will take me days to go through. But I want to give you at least something to think on about how dirty this process is. So if you're the prosecutor, this team of ladies who has all the money and all the resources of the federal government to bring anything they want to trial, I would say if you're going to prove that I hired unqualified people and unvetted according to whatever the standard is and so forth, then you would need to lay out a code section of law in black and white for the jury and the judge to see that says in black and white, this is required of a Virginia sheriff to swear in an auxiliary deputy, blah, blah, blah. Or you can simplify that and call Richmond and get the Mr. Jones, the director of the Virginia Sheriff's Association for decades, or you could get his attorney, who is truly the legal expert on sheriff law in Virginia. Get that attorney that represents all 123 sheriffs in Virginia and subpoena him to court. Have him there to the jury and let my attorneys ask him questions too. But see, that would have pretty much sunk a case if my attorneys could ask pointed questions of the expert. So why wouldn't they have some proof for a jury in a court case if you're going to convict me of doing things like hiring unqualified men, not
Mhm.
vetting them, and so on? Then shouldn't you be required to prove it? They didn't.
Exactly.
They fed this mess to the jury and they bought it. They didn't question it because it came out of the mouths of what they thought was the next thing to God Almighty, the DOJ, a Biden DOJ, I might add. But I say this because think about it. So, what are the requirements for an auxiliary? And absolutely can prove it. Not a soul under my watch of 12 years was ever hired that wasn't qualified, because you need to be a U.S. citizen, a high school diploma or equivalent, and 18. And those standards have changed very little through the years from the times of old. When I began my career in 1990, I was 18 years old and I had a high school diploma and I was a U.S. citizen. That's what was required to be a deputy sheriff in 1990, not anything else, not any physical standards, any higher education standards, any other back. There was no other, but you didn't have to take a polygraph. You didn't have to do an agility test. There's so many things that to be a city police officer, trooper, FBI agent, DEA, there's lots of things that they may require. And they may or may not actually be written into law. But the law is what governs sheriffs. We're not required to follow the same standards that a police chief is in Virginia for criminal justice services training. Most people don't know that. These agents, when they questioned me, they were under the false impression on a lot of those things. And I tried to correct them and they didn't want to believe me. They later had to go to my training officer in the state of Virginia and get themselves corrected. And that infuriated them even more in those weeks and months to follow after they initially talked to me, because they realized they really didn't know what the heck they were talking about on a number of things. They thought they had this bad sheriff, or, well, who had been this person who had been alleged to be what they thought I was, and they had their marching orders. But why did they have their marching orders? Well, let's roll the clock back to a time period just before they approached me back in the month before. They had a tap on my phone. And on that phone, I had a phone call with Wayne Ivey, a sheriff in Brevard, Florida, a sheriff over in Maryland. And we discussed, there was a group of us working in the Trump administration, the first term, for border security. And we later, when he left office, formed Protect America Now, a pact that continued to push and work toward border security with the Biden administration. Well, there was no cooperation, but we continued to work on the issue, and with sheriffs around the country growing and joining with us to do so. So our group was contacted by the person who had the Hunter Biden laptop hard drive. Well, actually, a former U.S. attorney and a state AG were contacted, and they in turn got in touch with Wayne Ivey. Wayne had this conversation with me and another sheriff. I think there were others on the call, but dropped off from our group. But I know at least us three were on it at the end. When he posed to, the proposal was for us to fly to a secret location, view the laptop crimes such as the child porn and other things on it, and then go return to swear out warrants for Hunter. And then after that, this state AG and some others who remain anonymous were going to pursue Biden and the rest of the family for the other crimes on the laptop. I agreed to do so.
Wow.
But now, Wayne said out of his own mouth on the call, he said, "Look, guys, if I do this by myself, I'm going to die a mysterious death. So I need more people. And if we can get a half dozen of us willing." And, it was a deep consideration for the moment, but I didn't think long. I just, Mike and I, the other sheriff, both said, no, count us in, we'll do it, because no one else in the country was. And that was the man's plea. He said, I can't find a state or federal agency in the country that will touch this thing, and it's wrong. Something needs to be done. And again, I go back to sheriffs. They and there are people that wonder, well, how would that pertain to you? And it's not complicated. The shortest, simplest I can make it: a sheriff in one county in Virginia can make an arrest in other counties within the state on felony charges if you're witnessing other crimes and so on. And it allows collaboration between jurisdictions and so forth easier. Same would take place over in Maryland. So even though Hunter may not have been in my county of Culpeper with the laptop, there's leeway there legally where we're able to swear out charges. And then of course, there's other than the state, there's federal law and swearing out charges with federal prosecutors. But anyway, I wanted to make sure I covered. There's so many haters and naysayers that no matter what I say when I give an interview or something, they always, if I don't explain every little detail of everything, how things function. It's oh, he's lying, or oh, that can't happen, that can't be true. And that's why I'm trying to keep it very simple today, with things that are easy to follow and easy to understand and verify, so that you don't have to go dig through a case file or a court transcript. Now I do recommend anyone watching this, especially if it's a citizen in my county, please go review the transcript of my trial and look at some of the horrible things that I'm talking about. I mean, just these 2 points, beginning and end. If you're starting the case off, to start with, if I took bribes, if I took this money and used it for myself, that's one thing, or if I hid it away. But if that money sat in my gun vault where it was waiting with other money to go into a campaign finance report and be deposited in the bank, um, that would be a reason they wouldn't want to go serve that search warrant, and they didn't. So the question I would have for the government, if I'm a citizen in Culpeper truly wanting to know the truth, and I would ask, why did you take the time to obtain a search warrant, a federal search warrant for my home, and you never executed in all this time? And they don't have to be executed on that day. For those who don't know, or at least I know it's a state level, when you obtain a search warrant, if you don't execute it that day, it's good for a couple weeks at least. So I'm certain that on the day they came to me and talked to me, I don't think that was the main thing. Um, the the point on the end, though, I think is as important as any, because at the end, when you have a judge who has listened to days of trial, and again, I don't hate the judge or have any disparaging things toward him. It's just that, I do hold him responsible, because you should hold the prosecutors responsible to prove everything that they're laying out for a jury. So I guess on that note, I do, because you know why wouldn't these prosecutors lay it out for the jury and say, here's the code section. This is what's required of a sheriff to swear in a person to be an auxiliary. And if they had done that, then the judge would not have been saying in sentencing that I hired unqualified to start with, because I did not. There's no one that didn't meet the minimum qualifications that took an oath, period. They talk about, oh, well, one was a convicted felon. Yes, he was. He had rights fully restored, except gun rights, prior to me ever meeting the man many years before. But he did get his gun rights restored as well. But the point is, you don't even have to. I got yelled at, my hand smacked in court, because one of the thousand things that we could not use for my defense, when I tried to raise that issue, when I was being hammered by prosecutors in front of a jury, that did you or did you not swear at a man who once had a felony conviction? Well, yes, I did. And that happens all over the country. Look at Jelly Roll. He's now a special deputy up in Northern. I mean, I think he's been in prison. So, I mean, and nothing against him. Guy sings great. He's famous. But there are people like that all over the place. I had,
Yeah.
I can point to Shaquille O'Neal, the actor that played Superman, Steven Seagal. There, you can go on and on with celebrities that have been sworn in as special deputies or auxiliaries in places all over the country. And what I did for certain people, similar, for fundraising and other things. For example, I had one gentleman who was popular TV personality who did a lot of fundraising for us for our Shop with a Cop program, and he was a member of our auxiliary program for years. He didn't know law enforcement; it wasn't ever intended. But lots of us sheriffs do that every day all over the country. And the things they charge me with, these donations that they claim were bribes, I just say that to anyone listening and wanting to understand. If what I did was a crime, then there's 1,000 others sheriffs that could be charged tomorrow with the same thing. They needed to do something to stop this lowly little local sheriff and his buddies who were going to go after the son of the most powerful man in the world, and they took their gloves off, and
They sure did.
they sure did a job of it.
I don't think I ever knew 100 I mean, obviously, because, I know you weren't talking for it during this time, but how horrific. Um, I wanna take just a quick break, and then, we're taking less breaks today, y'all, so that way we can hear, the full thing, and so, we'll be right back, after this break.
Life can be pretty unpredictable, filled with good days and not so good days. And sometimes, the only difference between the two is your level of preparedness. The Jace case lets you be better prepared for whatever comes your way. It contains antibiotics and other prescription medications so that you aren't caught unprepared. With a Jace case, you are able to get your prescription medication before the unpredictable happens, allowing you to turn those not so good days into great ones. Go to jace.com now and get your own Jace case.
Hey guys, welcome back. So, thank you to Jace Medical for helping support what we're doing here on this podcast and Ex America News. I actually just got my kit in for travel, so you can type in my name, Lynz, Lynz, and receive a discount on your order. So, be sure to go over there, check it out. You can actually order your prescriptions, so they're not just medical supply, but you can actually order a 90-day or I think a year supply of your medication going through there. So be sure to check them out. Thank you so much. So, welcome back, sir. I just this is heartbreaking to see, but this is the weaponization of government against you and against other American citizens, as we've seen over the last several years. Um, and I learned like how powerful of a position a constitutional sheriff, it's any sheriff, but it's one of the most powerfully elected positions in our country because you are um, the last man standing between the people and the government, the federal government, and I guess state government as well. So when you're explaining everything that you just went through, it's just is diabolical, and so it's just crazy.
It's chilling, and that was their intent to have a chilling effect. I point to plenty other people in positions more important than mine. I mean, they went after a president with trumped up charges, and we see where that landed. I mean, and fortunately, he's a man who had plenty money to defend himself, but even that didn't work. I mean, teams of lawyers weren't able to, in a court that was stacked against him. We see where that ended. Um,
Yeah.
and the weaponization of the system is what has to be stopped. It doesn't matter which political party. If it's allowed, then both sides will continue to use it, and whoever's in power will, use it to their benefit. And with me, um, I do think that I quickly got some attention for those stances, such as the Second Amendment, but there were others during COVID when it hit. I had a First Amendment stance that was not publicized as heavily because they quickly took a step back. Their um, bans on churches worshiping during COVID. I had a group, one church in particular, for example, who was gathering in the parking lot distanced with masks on, but they wanted to worship, and they were threatened with arrest. I had a local reporter, come to me to ask, what was my stance, since the state police and town police had agreed to make charges based on the health director's instructions. And I said, no, no one should sign the summons. If they are summoned, refuse. And if they are arrested, call me. I'll try to intervene if they're being arrested. But if they are arrested, I'm the sheriff and I run the jail, and they will not set foot in a jail cell. I will stop it. That's a First Amendment right. Now, that reporter ran back to get the other side, and quickly, within 24 hours, our state police and town police completely changed their stance and said that they wouldn't be responding to those calls. They'd direct them all to the health department because they didn't want that battle with me. And that's the power a sheriff can have. And that's not said to be disparaging of the local police or state police. We all remember back at that time, everyone was just kind of learning as they went. And I would say, if you don't have a strong foundation on what you've studied and truly believe to your bones about our Constitution, then it is very easy for you to be in a supervisory role or some type of leadership in law enforcement or government, and be led down a bad path pretty easily in times based on crisis or emergency that it doesn't vacate our Constitution. And there were a lot of us that really had to take strong stance behind the scenes to stop a lot of bad things from happening that year of 2020. Um, I could go on about that, but I will say I also obviously I made enemies along the way for a lot of things as sheriff, and I'm not ashamed of any of it. There were stances I felt I believed in were right, and someone had to, and I started talking. I jumped off a little bit earlier when I was talking about those people who say, "Well, how dare a local sheriff interpret the Constitution or case law with the Supreme Court?" And and I point many times in speeches years ago to give an example of how important it is by looking a few counties south of here to Caroline County, Virginia. In 1958, that sheriff chose to not take a stand on what I believe was common sense, and you had a constitution to look at. And 100 years before that, you had a civil war, which should have told you something as well. But that sheriff did nothing, stood by with his hands in his pockets, and let officers make an arrest of a black female who married a white male.
Mm.
And we received the Supreme Court Loving decision 10 years later. Now, who on earth in 1958 to 1968, in that period, it took 10 years to get a Supreme Court ruling. And why on earth would it take that long? But a sheriff just like me who had a spine could have said, well, no, I think it's pretty clear we're all created equal and, so forth. And no, it doesn't matter the color of your skin, two people wanting to get married in America. But my
Mhm.
goodness, here we sit with that case to look back on. So that I use an example when I stood for the Second Amendment, much like that Loving case where, as a local sheriff, yeah, I mean, I understand there may be some things that are just too deep to wade into for a local official or someone not directly involved with the lawmaking process. But to me, it was simply a right or wrong, and I was not going to have our citizens disarmed when I could see clearly there had already been a ruling. I wasn't just interpreting the Constitution. I was able to see that many people had, seen the decision and understood it to be the same as I did. So I don't think that was a hard decision. It's just I stepped forward and took a different approach. And, there's over 3,000 sheriffs in America, and I never saw another one stand behind me and say, do the same. And that's not to disparage them. I'm just saying that, sometimes you step forward, take a strong stance, others will
Mhm.
follow. Sometimes they won't. They'll just stay, well, a little ways away and say, let's see how this works out. And that's the shame of what I've went through the last 2.5 years is there's over 3,000 sheriffs in America that, well, I hope I get to talk to many of them one day or answer their questions. And guys, any girls, and all of you, any sheriff in America, if you are listening to this at any point and you have a question, I am more than happy to tell you the the horror show of what I saw and went through, and the hows and whys, and whatever I can do to suggest for you to avoid or to stand and fight if you do get involved in anything similar, because I deeply believe it is simply a matter of time. We may be privileged with having a great president now that's starting to turn some of this around. And I don't say anyone's perfect. I mean, Republican, Democrat doesn't matter. I do believe God has blessed us with a second term of Trump. And you may completely disagree with the man, his personality, his anything about him other than I have to say, how do you disagree with the things that his policy are doing to make America better, safer again? Closing the border, I mean, that's a no brainer. And all the other things are trying to turn around, the lawfare and so forth. So, sheriffs across the country, if you're listening, we won't be lucky enough to have a Trump forever. So, prepare now. If citizens, that you have a sheriff that's particularly weak when it comes to taking stances on things that matter, then go and talk to them. Let them know they have your support. A sheriff will take a stronger stance when he knows he has the support of the community. And I was lucky to have a great amount of support in this community. And I'll pause for one moment to say this to all those people, thousands in my county that were and have been so kind and supportive of me through all this time. I never can thank you enough. Your prayers, your messages, they mean the world to me and my family, and I can't thank you enough for that. I still have, you know, many people constantly contacting me, and it means the world. We will heal and get through this. We've gotten through the worst of it thus far, and it's through prayer and God's help. And I know that the thousands of you that were always in touch with me through these last couple of years. Your prayers mattered, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart. And of course, President Trump and the others that God worked through to bring it to this point. Um, and I'll say this because people can hate all they want or disagree all they want, but it's my belief, and I'm entitled to that as an American. If you saw that video of Butler, Pennsylvania, and you have any doubt that at that precise moment and second that God's hand didn't save that man's life to put him back in office for us, then I don't think there's a lot that will convince you that we have a gift right now of a good man that's in trying to do the right thing. You may not like some of what he says. He loves to have fun and poke at people, and he does stir things, and that's just part of his personality. But the man himself and what he does for America, he deeply loves this country. He's raised his family here, and a fine family from everything I see. I mean, that man, he's business and other things in his past, people always attack him all you want. No one's perfect, but God has used amazing people down through history to do his work, and far worse men than the man we have in the White House right now have been used by God to do great things. And I just say, we as a nation need to pray together for the success of the country, and don't worry so much about the individual. Pray that our president stays safe and is able to do the work that he needs to do. And I'll get off that soapbox now, but I just felt I needed to
No,
say it.
I'm so thankful that you shared everything because I know there was a lot of things that you couldn't share publicly. Oh, I mean, I didn't know what they were. Obviously, I'm hearing some of this, for the first time. I'm just saying, I mean, the fact that they tapped your phone, I'm sure that was illegal. But
Well,
just, uh,
they did think they hit I'm not saying they didn't hit the marks of legal, but the thing is, you also have to look at the background of what gets them to there, and that's a long story. And
yeah,
I don't want to get it too hard for the average citizen to understand. And like I've only talked about the beginning and the end, and not the meat of the trial. But I mean, I could go on and on. I mean, you would think if you are being accused of what I was, and taking these bribes, so to speak, and instead of donations, they were bribes. Well, then you would think I would, for example, how did it start? Well, there's this one guy who was a friend for years and headed my auxiliary deputy program. He got caught up, or well, for whatever reason, I can't, I won't go into a lot of background that I can't prove or point to right now easily. So I'll just say, however they chose to come after me, it started with this gentleman, an old friend who headed my auxiliary program, who they got caught up on millions of dollars in tax evasion, and he faced 100 years in prison. So they said, you can set up the sheriff, wear wires, and coordinate these undercover people to take to him and do a sting operation over a period of many weeks. And he did. And they brought a couple undercover agents and another undercover informant. They brought them and had these these conversations, and they played snippets of it in court. Um, Conveniently, there were things that would help me in conversations, and they just didn't happen to have that recorded. The one most glaring example that made me sick to my stomach, they had this one, and the agent even admitted to it. It was just laughable. So you have this video where you see me, a glimpse of me, and it goes black. And there's this garbled mess of voices, 3 or 4 voices in the room, and you can't tell if it's me or the other guy that sounds like me, and you can't even tell the words. But they put it up. They put a caption on the screen of what supposedly I'm saying. It's my voice and what I'm saying. Well, even the agent can't swear that that's what's said. But they ask him, so what happened? And he, with a straight face, says that this multi-billion-dollar agency, the FBI, he says, we build all our recording equipment in-house, and it's not as durable as commercially made equipment that other agencies use. And oftentimes we'll lose audio or video or both during these undercover operations. So you're telling me that the FBI doesn't have as good equipment as I did for my detectives working undercover in a little sheriff's office. And I can tell you, you compare the two, they are night and day different. What we wouldn't think of using the crap that they brought into court, but this is just yet one of many examples I saw that it's just hard to believe. This guy with a straight face said that, yeah, they build it in house and it's not as durable, and it will break down, and happens pretty frequently, evidently. And isn't that convenient? If you don't have me saying exactly what you need me to, it'd be nice to have some garbled communications or some things where we were searching and searching. I had one that I was desperately having my lawyers try to find, where I know I made very clear pushback to this guy, this one who was setting me up, about how he was phrasing and doing things. And I clarified it all for him and laid it out. No, this is what A, B, and C, this is how we do this. And it would have completely changed the view of a jury. But somehow that whole conversation in that room that day was recorded right up to the point when the door swings open, when I would be heard saying all of what I needed a jury to hear. Well, that couldn't be found. It just wasn't there. And when we would try to find things, that's another example. Talk about just a info dump. They dumped a terabyte of information on my attorneys with only a few months to prepare. They have other work to do as well, but even if they work night and day, a terabyte is 1,300 four-drawer filing cabinets, basically, of paper to go through. Now, you would at least think that they would have a normal, easy to interpret table of contents to locate when you're searching for information. We had to go to court and argue before the judge to ask the government to put it in a table of contents that my lawyers could easily find and search to locate the things they needed to defend me. You would think that's a basic right you're entitled to as a citizen. Well, no.
Mm-hmm.
Check the ruling. The court said, no, we're not going to make the government give you a better list to follow to find your information. So if on page 90 you find one picture or document you're looking for, and page 9,844 is the other one, they don't need to do anything to help you locate that second piece. They can just make it a mess and just say, good luck with that. But that's the whole system. In the federal system, that's why only 1% actually go to court. And of that, very few win, because the system, the way it is stacked, I mean, if you think about it, just to fight it to begin with, they know and they intend. And we have many examples, not just with my case, but, the Trump administration, others are finding things where these prosecutors and others, they laugh and say, well, yes, we're going to cost them every dime and one of the prosecutors did say that in my case. She suddenly resigned not long after she indicted me. I don't know if that has anything to do with an ethics violation, but she was a 16-year prosecutor and she left all of a sudden. But I use that as an example. One of the ladies had a conversation with another attorney that got to me, my people, where it was said that, no, we may not have a case against him to convict him or even charge him, but I'm going to make sure that he loses every penny and he will not get elected again. And she indicted me. She worked for months from January up until summer, and I filed at the last minute for reelection. And when I did, I know the person that actually enlightened her to that day, and they described her demeanor when she was told that I had filed for reelection. And the very few days later, when she seated the grand jury again for this crap investigation she'd been doing for months on me, she indicted me with a surprise indictment that next day they met. And I can tell you, my attorney, who is, and let me say this, that first attorney who's representing me out of DC, Mark's his name, great law firm, powerful firm. I tried to get the best people I could to help me, but he was no fan of Trump or any of the stances that I took. But he was doing his job as an attorney should, the best he could. And for a guy who was just totally against most of what I stood for, Trump and others, the background for why they're coming after me, he just he could never stomach and believe that this really, in those early months, was what I said it was, until that surprise indictment. I've never heard the words come out of that man's mouth before that did that day when he called me and I went to meet with him about this surprise indictment. And he spoke of how wrong it was. He said, I've worked for decades in this and my whole life in this. And he said, this is so wrong. Ethically, he said, I can't describe it. He said, I told that lady we were coming to sit down to do a reverse proffer. Proffer is part of the system that you have with the Fed system. And so he had been communicating with her, but he got his eyes opened in the days to follow that of just what was going on with this. And I think even someone who was a diehard supporter or loyalist to that political regime, even he was awakened to the crap that has gone on in this country. And he saw it firsthand with my case. And Mark, if you listen to this, I'm sorry to throw you out there, but it's the truth. and
Well,
I later had another attorney, Phil, who did represent me from then on through trial, and I thank God for him. He was a great emotional support as well as a good lawyer to fight for me. But the battle was
mhm,
just too insurmountable. I sold everything I had just to try to pay the attorney fees, and I might as well have spent nothing for all the good it did because once we got into the close preparation for trial and they kept knocking down everything we would try to bring to court, like not being able to subpoena another auxiliary deputy. I mean,
mhm,
that's the program you're hammering me on with the undercovers that supposedly I did so bad a thing. Well, if I've had hundreds and hundreds, I mean, in the 12 years as sheriff, of all the deputies I swore in, the hundreds upon hundreds that we had, um, and then the auxiliary deputies that I don't know a good count on them, but we could bring none of them in to say, well, and especially the very wealthy ones and the people or celebrities and others that I had on the roster to say, did Scott Jenkins ever ask you for a dime for anything, campaign or otherwise, ever since you've known him? And those men over and over would have said no, because see that's the thing that I think rubbed a lot of people wrong in the community to start with was, see, when I became um, sheriff, I started with a different approach in the community and not wanting money and political connections to influence it. So I put some guardrails in place pretty strong in the beginning and maintained it through the years. And that frustrated a lot of the old system of things. And it fast forward to the end, it made some local enemies and others very helpful to jump on and help what they could with the push from the feds as well. And there's so much of this I can go into and explain at a later point better for people. But today, my goal with you was to just give a little bit of a hook to local citizens to hang their hat on to say, yeah, if that's true, and those are things I can go check on, then if that's true, then what on earth else was done wrong in his case, and did he get railroaded? And a lot of people have looked at this, and I shout out again to Ed Martin, the president. Ed and his team had to do a dive quickly, deeply into my case to find some of these things in order to be able to make a recommendation to the president. And sir, I've never met you, but uh, I can't thank you enough for what you did to keep me from going to prison for something like this. And General Flynn, Roger Stone, um, gentlemen, I thank you from the bottom of my heart as well. All the help that you were to me as well. There are many people I can thank, but I at least wanted to mention them as well. And thank you, Lynn, for this.
absolutely. Yeah. I'm trying not to cry. I'm so thankful that President Trump pardoned you. I know that um, this just happened right before you were, headed to prison for 10 years. And so thank you to Roger Stone, General Flynn, President Trump, and Mr. Martin, and so many others. Thank you to you for standing as a city on a hill and showing the other, thousands of sheriffs what it looks like to take a stand. And I'm hoping and praying that they'll watch this and they'll see that this is what shoes to fill, big shoes to fill. So thank you so much, as a friend, and just someone. We're going to continue praying for you. If you ever want to come back, you're always welcome here. We will always bring unfiltered truth. You guys are hearing my Belgian in the background. Sorry, guys. Um, but thank you so much. I know that you're, taking it easy right now and trying to recover and spend time with family and heal. Um, where can people follow you over on X, and is there any other platforms that they can follow you on?
At the moment, no. At Scott H. Jenkins is the one. I was headed to
Okay.
prison, so other social media was not live. And honestly, the last couple of years, though, I had completely gone dark on anything like that. I will say to people, though, so you understand, we needed this week to just catch our breath and have some family time to ourselves. I will fire up a Facebook page and other connections where whether it's the citizens I served who may have concerns or questions, or sheriffs across the country might have questions. I'll get that to you to push out. We'll get that done this week. We just needed a break. I remember what it was like in 2020 with that 15 minutes of fame over the 2A stuff. It was unbelievable when people from all over the nation are contacted, and I was just afraid in these past days when we just needed some time to kind of catch our breath. I didn't want to start that yet, but thank you for asking, and I'll get that page and or other contact info to you as soon as I can.
No worries. Thank you so much for joining me here today. And y'all be sure to share this and get it out there. It's available on my X and also Rumble and X American News. Thank you so much, guys. Until next time, God bless you. God bless America.